region. This is the Open Bible Miracle Center here in Poonah, Trinidad and Tobago, in collaboration with the Faith-Based Network of Trinidad and Tobago, which is an amalgamation of faith groups addressing issues relating to family life and national well-being. I want to thank you for allowing us to come into your homes and your spaces again tonight, albeit in a different format. Here tonight, having a panel discussion with some of our nation's luminaries in various fields and servants of the public. These wonderful persons have served our nation in various aspects of society, legal fraternity, medical fraternity, epidemiology, and others as well. So we would like to commence our program this evening, and I will introduce those of our presenters who are on, or panelists who are on. I want to remind you that you can send WhatsApp messages to 732-6668, 732-6668, or when you put messages in the Facebook that you're looking, whatever question or message that comes, I will pass it on to the various presenters. So again, welcome, and I thank you for joining us. This evening, ladies and gentlemen, we have our team of presenters. We have, I will start with Reverend Gerald Peters, who is an epidemiologist of many years with great, wonderful experience and so on. Someone sent me a message, why so many men? Oh my. Oh, okay. So I would like to introduce, so as I introduce our panelists, they will just give you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll come back and commence the discussion. Reverend Peters, would you introduce yourself, sir, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I will introduce our next panelists.
Thank you very much, Pastor Mansing. It's an honor and a privilege to be here tonight and to share with the rest of the panelists. A little bit about Gerald Peters. I've been 50 years in the Ministry of Health, working in health. Last month was 50 years. Started at San Fernando General Hospital on the 17th of August, 1970. And I've moved through from a qualified nurse, went on to a scholarship in public health, and went to Mona, did a master's degree in public health, specializing in epidemiology. And I also went to Emory University, Compound CDC, to do postgraduate work in epidemiology with epidemiologists from around the world, Russia, India, Africa. I was head of the National Surveillance Unit in Trinidad until 2009, when I retired as head of that unit, and Dr. Hines, who you all know now, Emory Hines, took over from me, head of that unit. When I retired, I went to Dutch St. Martin as the national epidemiologist. There, the first national epidemiologist in Dutch St. Martin. So I have a British experience, studied in Trinidad and Mona, Jamaica, studied in Emory, Atlanta, and I also worked under the Dutch in St. Martin over the last 50 years.
Wonderful.
That's
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Pastor Peters. My next panelist tonight is a man that I share great admiration for, respect for his contributions, in the national landscape on various topics and so on, and for his no-nonsense stand to things that are not right and so on. I really do. It will sound as though we are very good friends. We are friends by telephone. But I want to introduce former government senator, also a judge, attorney at law, Mr. Larry Lala. Mr. Lala, welcome to this forum. First time with the Faith Network and the Open Bible Miracle Center, but please just greet the people and introduce yourself. Say a little bit more about yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Rev, and good evening to my fellow panelists and your viewers. Well, I think you have basically summarized who I am, so I don't know if there's much more for me to say. I am an attorney at law practicing in Trinidad and Tobago for the last 25 years. I'm a member of the Bar of New York, Florida, and Guyana. I served as a high court judge, a temporary high court judge between 2006 to 2007. I'm a former temporary senator, government senator, and serve on various state boards, and always trying to make a contribution where I can to the legal landscape, sometimes the political landscape, as best as I can.
Very much. Thank you much, Mr. Lala. My next colleague, we were able to travel a little bit together to Costa Rica to do some studies in HIV and AIDS. And we spent time. She's a dear lady, very precious lady, very caring with a very, very motherly heart. She's a medical doctor by profession and a present independent senator in Trinidad and Tobago. I want to introduce my good friend and fellow SBN board member as well, Dr. Maria Dillon Remy, Senator Dr. Maria Dillon Remy. Senator, greet the people and tell them a little bit about you, please.
Thank you, Winston. Maria Dillon Remy from the Republic of Tobago and Trinidad. In other words, the better part of the Twin Island Republic, Tobago.
All right.
Yes, pediatrician, and therefore very interested in, well, in health. Spent 30 plus years in health, like you, Reverend Peters. Left health in 2010 as hospital medical director at the Scarborough Regional Hospital. This was an old hospital before we went into the new one. And since then, I've been involved with activities related to leadership development, being a member of the John Maxwell leadership team. And I'm really passionate about developing leaders now, because I do think that what we need in our country right now is for leaders to rise up and do what needs to be done at every level. And as Winston said, recently appointed independent senator, but my interest in my faith actually is what fuels everything that I do, and making sure that whatever I do is in keeping with what the tenets of my faith says. So I'm happy to be here today. I really am very excited about what we have to do as a nation. Winston, I'm really looking forward to how we are going to get through the next 5 years. I really am. Because I think with the help of God, we can do it, and do it differently too. So I'm glad to be here tonight.
Thank you very much, Dr. Remy. I want to kick off tonight, seeing that we're dealing with this public health issue. I want to kick off tonight. Each of our speakers will speak for a few minutes and share some thoughts, and then we will have a cross discussion, and I will also be sharing some questions which have come in. It seems as though our next panelist, Dr. Hussein, is having some challenges, but we will continue, and we will he will join in as soon as he gets through technologically. I want to kick off tonight with Pastor Peters, Gerald Peters. Can you? This is a public health issue, an epidemiological issue. Can you address that? Give a little brief explanation. Remember, we have some time frames that we are working with, so let's keep it in there. And what can we continue to do as a nation and improve on? Pastor Peters.
Thank you very much, Brother Mansing. Firstly, I want to look at the trends that we are seeing in Trinidad, as well as the US, India, and there are a few other countries around the world. We started beautifully in March. We were happy. Our cases were primarily imported cases, and we were comfortable with that. We had them in isolation. We had some in quarantine. But things changed after the Prime Minister announced election. And they had 6 weeks prior to August 10th. And looking at a line graph showing the trends and the patterns, there was an escalation, and we are still with that wave. I'm praying and I'm believing that in the next few days we'll be cutting down on that height. We'll be making our descent from that high number of deaths as well as cases. What can we as a nation look forward to in the future? Internationally, we realize that technology is a big part of our lives, has become a big part of our lives. We see that there is that rush for digital payments now, and that is a good thing because it reduces the spread of COVID-19. And at the same time, businesses can stay open if we go the digital way. Technology can make society more resilient in the face of pandemic and other threats. So whether we are in lockdown mode or whether we are in quarantine mode, technology can help us. May I say that technologies may have a long-lasting impact beyond COVID-19. We all agree that COVID-19 has changed the face of the world. And we, whether we want to or not, we have to change. Online shopping would increase. Robot will increase. In SARS, when SARS that started in China in 2002, in November, at that point in time, I was the national epidemiologist in Trinidad. We had no cases. We had one query case. So we had no confirmed cases in Trinidad. But it is said from reading that the marketplace platform in China changed drastically after SARS in 2003. Digital and contactless payments will have to be the order of the day. Most of us are working from home now, remote work, less travel time, distance learning, what some of us as lecturers, probably what I didn't say, I've been a lecturer at medical school for the last 30 years in Mount Hope, 30 years also lecturing with Niels Kostat, lecture to nurses, lectures to doctors in training over the last 30 years. Telehealth, which you are seeing, and the population is now coming close to where you can stay at home and the Ministry of Health can monitor you. You can, check your temperature and other ailments and report. Online entertainment, we are seeing that. And also robotics and drones will find themselves more and more active in the society. What are some of the strategies to combat this pandemic? Common sense, I would want to say, number one. We have to look at our hand washing or wearing of masks or social distancing. You hear some have been talking about herd immunity, but at this stage in our population, in this stage with this virus, we cannot even entertain the thought of herd immunity. And probably later on, I would talk a little bit about that. What is herd immunity? And when is herd immunity used in a population? Some are waiting for a vaccine, but the average vaccine takes 10 years. It could be 15. It can go beyond that. Let me just briefly share, most of the members of the panel will know this. There are basically 5 stages of vaccine development. The first stage is where you have the discovery research, and that can take 2 to 5 years. We are still with COVID-19 learning new things. We have not totally discovered or researched. Every month, more or less, we can see new things, new information cropping up. And there might be as much as 100 patent vaccines right now in that first 2-year phase. Then there is the preclinical phase that can take 2 years, where you can have probably 20 potential vaccines. The third phase is where you have the clinical development. And that clinical development is subdivided into 3 phases. Where phase 1, is it safe? And there could be 10 potential vaccines that are used over a 2-year period, 1 to 2 years. The second subphase, you ask the question, does it activate an immune response? That can take another 2 to 3 years. And there could be 5 potential vaccines being used for that. And the third phase, subphase under the clinical development, you ask the question, does it protect against the disease? And here you zero into 1 potential vaccine. Then stage 4, step 4, regulatory review and approval, and that in itself can take a year or 2, where you have a vaccine, and then after the vaccine that you zero in, you think about manufacturing and delivery. So it can take something like 10 years. But I know we can fast track, and several scientists are saying between the next 18 months, 12 to 18 months, we might be able to have a vaccine. Let me just, as I wrap up here, dispel some of the myths that are bandied about as far as COVID-19 and coronavirus. There is a global network, and they said between the months April to June, just 3 months this year, they applied warning labels to 98 million pieces of COVID-19 misinformation. And they removed 7 million pieces of content that could lead to imminent harm. Further, they directed over 2 billion people to resources from health authorities when they tried to share a link about COVID-19. There would be a pop-up that would appear that would connect them to a credible health information system. As we go to the man in the street, they would hear things like hand dryers can get rid of COVID. That's a myth. Thermal scanners, that's a myth. Cannot detect infected persons. Alcohol, taking a bath with alcohol or chlorine all over your body would not take care of COVID-19. Ultraviolet disinfection light cannot take care of COVID-19. Warmer weather will stop the spread, as you heard before election. That cannot stop COVID. Young people don't get sick. That was bandied about in the US, and many of them contracted COVID. Social distancing not necessary after testing. That too is not true. COVID can spread over 5G network. And there is a lot that I've read and seen, but 5G network cannot spread COVID. Rinsing your nose with saline would not stop COVID-19. Wiping your body with Clorox. And this is an interesting one. Consuming breast milk, it is said, some are saying, will take care of COVID. That's a myth. The virus, they are saying, is a mutated form of the common cold, far from the truth. It is also said the virus is made in a lab. That's a myth. Pets can spread the new virus. The scientists have not yet confirmed this. Kids cannot catch this virus, and we know that 2-year-olds have died from this virus. Babies have died from this virus. The problem will go away as soon as we get a vaccine. And I want to emphasize this point, the problem will not go away when we get a vaccine. As a matter of fact, smallpox, it took decades, even after having a vaccine, to get rid of smallpox. Decades. Hopefully it is not spread by mosquitoes and ticks. So we have to listen to the health experts and the scientists. I'll pause here.
Thank you very much, Gerald Peters, epidemiologist on the panel tonight. And the takeaway there, you know, technology, big use of technology as we move forward. Let's get away from the myths, and Maria and I as HIV educators, remember there were so many myths that we had to treat with Mr. Lala when we dealt with this whole issue of HIV and AIDS in the early years of the spread of HIV and so on. And but there is hope, a common sense approach and so on. I want to thank you very much, Pastor Peters. We will be coming back for cross discussions in a little while. I want to switch over now to our attorney on the panel tonight, Mr. Lala, as we look at some of, you know, the laws and some of the regulations that have been implemented so far and its impact on the society. Some are saying that, I mean, some of it may be a little harsh, some of it a bit lazy law, bad law, and so on. The impact on some of the religious bodies, specifically those of us who are preaching and singing and that kind of stuff. Mr. Lala, over to you, and you guide us through.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rev. Well, first of all, I know there has been a lot of controversy concerning the passage of the mask law, for want of a better term. I believe, however, that the government has done a fair job in relation to the regulation which has been implemented as of last week, I believe, or week before, because it's a difficult issue to deal with in law because there are so many permutations. There are so many varieties to the masks that are worn out there. There are so many reasons, valid reasons, why persons may not, it may not be right to compel someone to wear a mask. And I think that the regulation which has been passed has done quite a fair job in covering all the situations. The problem then becomes one of law enforcement. And it will be interesting to see how the police proceeds to deal with the regulation and when they charge persons, how they are able to present the cases in court to satisfy the requirements of the regulation. I see that over the weekend, quite a number of people, I think 30-something people were charged in the Mayaro area. I know that quite a few people are driving in order to try and, you know, beat the boredom at home, the cabin fever, so to speak. They're taking drives with their families on the weekend, and maybe some of them are not wearing the mask when they're in the car with the family, which you're now required to do. So I saw quite a few people were charged over the weekend. So it'll be interesting to see whether the police is able to satisfy the requirements of the regulations and prosecute those matters, have regard to all the various reasons persons may legitimately give for not wearing the mask. For example, it was necessary for you to eat or drink, you had medication to take, you were distressed by wearing the mask. There are many different reasons that persons can give. But I think the government has done a good job driving around, moving around over the weekend. And last week, I saw basically everyone adhering to the regulation, and that's a good thing. Over the weekend, I was at a business place, and a gentleman came in to make a purchase, and he was wearing the mask in a way that many people believe it is right to do. That is, he had his mouth covered, but not his nose. And the business owner had to buff him and say, look, what you doing? Wear a mask properly. The thing is, the regulation requires you to wear the mask or a face shield. You're permitted as well to wear a face shield instead of a mask. But you must cover your nose, your mouth, and your chin. So that buff that the businessman gave the customer was a valid buff. Business people could be charged if there are persons in their business place who are not properly masked or shielded. Reverend, you raised the issue about the 5 versus 10. So let me just explain that. In public places, you could only have a gathering of 5 persons. Under the regulations, however, they have permitted religious proceedings to take place with 10 persons. So for example, in a church, in a mosque, in a temple, you could have up to 10 persons gathered if there is some sort of religious proceeding. And previously, under the previous version of the regulation, for whatever reason, it was impermissible to broadcast proceedings over the internet. That has now been sorted out. So under the regulations, Reverend, in your church, you could have 10 people gathered for some sort of ceremony, and you could then do a live and broadcast that over the internet. That is perfectly permissible. I think the biggest issue going forward, and the most pressing issue going forward as far as the law is concerned and the COVID is concerned, is this issue of our nationals abroad. I know in the press over the weekend and even today, stories were carried about the plight and the distress being faced by persons who are abroad. My heart goes out to these people because many of them, if not all of them, have been stranded in various countries throughout the world for 6 going on 7 months. This is a stay that they would not have catered for, their families would not have catered for. It is very expensive for most people to stay abroad for that length of time. And I'm sure that many of them are living in squalor or close to squalor. So I think there's an urgent need for the government going forward to do something significant to ensure that it's able to bring our citizens home. Remember, it's a freedom of movement issue under the Constitution. So it is something that has to be addressed. I am not satisfied with the position adopted by the Minister of National Security I think on Saturday, saying that they are going to speed up the return of nationals abroad. The reason being, he has not given sufficient details as to how that is going to be done. Right now, the biggest complaint by citizens abroad is that when they email the Ministry of National Security at the email address given, they get a response saying, all right, your application is being processed, and then they don't hear anything for several weeks, even months. In the press today, there were stories of persons who emailed the ministry since July, and they got an acknowledgement saying, fine, we received your application for an exemption, but then nothing else. So, and nothing that the minister did over the weekend satisfies me that they have put things in place to ensure, one, that when applications are made for exemptions, they will be processed quickly. And he has not stated how long these applications are going to take to process. Further, he has not given any details as to what requirements persons have to meet in order to get these exemptions, and in what order must those requirements be met. Let me just explain what I mean by that. Someone trying to get back into the country, they will have to apply for an exemption. They will have to purchase a ticket. They will have to do the COVID test, the required COVID test. In what order is that to be done? Should you apply for the exemption, you don't know how long that is going to take, then try to get the test, then purchase a ticket, or should you purchase the ticket, then apply for the exemption, and then take the test? They haven't explained that. And that is resulting in a lot of confusion, a lot of distress for citizens who are stuck abroad as well as their families. And I think it's important, because it's a freedom of movement issue, for the government to treat with this in a proper manner so that citizens could understand what are the requirements they would have to meet in order to get back into the country. You know, it's becoming ridiculous in the way it's being done. So for example, today I had a client whose son is stuck in Germany, and she doesn't know how she's going to get that boy back to Trinidad because she applied some time ago to the ministry, and she only received the response that, look, yes, all right, we're processing. In the meantime, Barbados has its borders open, so persons are able to fly and get to Barbados, and then when they get to Barbados, they're stuck there, although it is fairly close to home. So what I advise her to do is get him to Barbados, and then we'll apply for the exemption. Hopefully the ministry will speed up the processing and get the boy home. You know, when you look at the other countries in the Caribbean, Barbados, Antigua, St. Lucia, they have all, and maybe because they are more dependent on tourism, they have all opened up their borders to a greater degree than Trinidad. And because there's a freer movement of persons. Granted, there are many requirements to comply with to ensure that you're quarantined and whatever. But we have shown that we're able to deal with those things. The point is the government needs to do much more in relation to the persons stuck abroad. I think right now there are about upwards of 2,000 persons. By no means is that an insignificant number. So as an attorney at law, I would want to see that issue be dealt with.
Thank you, Mr. Lala, for your insight. Now we want to come back because I know that matter is significant, and even during the waiting period, what are some of the options or considerations that government can have or take to assist persons abroad, during this downtime? Some people, as you rightly said, might be living in squalor. I think of the case of a couple of Trinidadians who go to a shelter in London at night, and then they just roam the streets in the day.
Absolutely. And part of the problem is that they are fearful of, maybe going on Facebook and putting their plight out there for people to understand. The reason being, if their name gets out, chances are, we know things operate in Trinidad. I want to cast allegations against anyone unnecessarily, but people could be victimized. Right? And your name could go to the end of the list. So persons are fearful about coming forward to let us, the citizens in Trinidad and Tobago, understand exactly what they are going through. But the circumstances are very, very difficult for many hundreds and even thousands of our citizens.
Thank you. Time is moving really fast. I want to get to Dr. Remy now to talk to us about some of the other matters even relating and impacting on Tobago and the tourism and also the medical issues and so on. Dr. Remy, over to you. And then we're just going to have some cross discussion, and I want to field some of the questions which have come in so far.
So, Winston, we are in a crisis that we have never faced before. I still remember when we were waiting, when we had just had the H1N1 epidemic. It was pandemic at that time. It was in 2007, and we were making efforts to put ICU in the hospital at Scarborough, which was the old hospital in Tobago. We now have this, and there were many meetings that were held with the ministry as we prepared a big document, putting things in place. We put things in place at that point in time. It never happened. We are now in 2020 with a full pandemic before us. I do not think that our citizens, for different reasons, I don't think the majority of citizens have yet come to terms with the fact that this is a crisis and needs to be addressed. So we have the people who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of the masks, etc. And again, there's been so much misinformation or people not wanting to do what the government says because they don't trust the information coming from the government. We have a lot of that going on. And as a result, we are having the situation in Trinidad and Tobago as it is now, where there is a rapid rise in the number of cases and the health services are being overwhelmed, both in Tobago and in Trinidad and in Tobago. In Tobago, the numbers are not that many. There's a total of 37 persons as of today, and we have had one death. But the impact is the same as in Trinidad in terms of because it's a small place, one hospital, the impact has been great with both in terms of staff, in terms of the ability to be able to take care of the other non-COVID situations like cancer and surgeries and stuff like that. All these things are impacted as a result of COVID. Outside of the direct health issues, we have issues related to the whole pandemic affair, where people are so fearful of what is happening to them. As a result, they're going into depression. the issues with the economy and how that is being impacted, the fact that people now, as a result of the lockdown, people are now in spaces that they were not. Let's say if you're having problems in your home, before you would have gone out, but now you are forced to be in. And as a result, we have the things like the rise of domestic abuse and child abuse and stuff like that, things that you were talking about just now. So this business about COVID, the impact is across the several spheres in our community, not just health, but in every other place. And in order to deal with it, we have to have a similar type of response in terms of every aspect of the community must be working in tandem so that we can make a dent on this thing. And my hope is that the principles that we put into effect now in terms of dealing with COVID are things that will take us through for the future. And we can talk about that as we go along. So we are in a crisis. It is significant. A lot of us are not yet taking it seriously for different reasons. We have to, because what is facing us right now, and what we have to do in terms of putting things in place, we must use that to go forward in the future. That's what I have to say, Winston.
Thank you very much, Dr. Remy. Pastor Peters, we lost you on the video. Can you just put your video back on, please? Unfortunately, Dr. Roger Hussein, he didn't get on. But we want to go to some cross discussions and, also field a few of the questions, some of the questions that would have come on so far. So the challenge, one of the questions is, what would have, I know someone said that an election was announced and so everything took place and then all of a sudden there was all this spread. But we went about 60 to 80 days without any new case being identified. And then all of a sudden, this may be more for Dr. Remy or the epidemiologist, Gerald Peters. All of a sudden, there was the news cases and just a proliferation of cases. What might have caused this? Seeing that our borders, the question that our borders, primarily the Piarco and, was closed. Where did it come from?
Right. So we have other borders that are not closed. They are very porous. And we know that that is an issue because people are coming through these porous borders from countries where there's a much higher prevalence of COVID than in Trinidad and Tobago. And that's a reality. The second thing about the election, yes, there were about 60 or 80 days when there were no cases. And if you look at the numbers, 2 weeks after that election was called on the 3rd of July. 2 weeks, we had about 130 something cases at that point in time. 2 weeks later, if you look at in terms of the epidemiology, 2 weeks later, you would expect if you have cases at that time, they would show up 2 weeks later. There were only about another 2 cases at that time, 141. Then after, a month later, by the end of July, you had another few cases up to 140 something. End of July now is when you were in the heat of the election. This is when you had the big campaigns all around the place. And these campaigns were in every community in Trinidad and Tobago. And we saw what was happening, Winston. They were not social distancing. They were not wearing masks. They were hugging and all sorts of things. So I am very clear in my mind that was a significant reason for the spread. In addition to which, as I said, people would have been coming in through these porous borders.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Remy. I concur. But it's just Mr. Lala, from the perspective of national security, is why are we, given the challenges across the world, why were we so careless with the other unofficial borders?
I mean, I as a citizen of the country, I'm always hard pressed to understand why in this day and age of modern technology, you have drones, you have very sophisticated radar that doesn't really have to be, as big as they used to be, as they had to be, a couple decades ago. Why is it so difficult to monitor our southern borders? And I mean, I wouldn't mince matters at all. In my view, it is clear that the virus was able to enter the country through the southern borders from Venezuela, maybe even people from Brazil, I don't know. And that resulted in persons being in the community during the election time, and the increased activity as a result of the numerous motorcades and what was happening during those motorcades resulted in the spread. I don't believe that the government was suppressing numbers before, and you have a lot of conspiracy theories out there. I don't agree with those. To me, it is quite straightforward what happened. But I think it's a serious indictment against the government that they have, and they were not able to secure our southern borders, having regard to the importance of the issue at hand. There should have been an increased presence along that border to ensure that persons were not allowed to get in, or that if persons were able to make it to land, there was a proper way to deal with them to ensure that any danger to the country at large is avoided. And that was not done. Very clearly, it wasn't done.
Very clear. And Mr. Lala, you said that we have the radars, we have the other things. I also want to add we have Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time. You have drones that you can able, they're not difficult to operate. The police can operate these drones, and let us get a proper handle of what is going on along these southern borders, and when vessels are coming in. I mean, Venezuela is still some distance from Trinidad. You must be able to pick these up by radar, these vessels moving along from one coast to the next, and monitor them and let us understand where they're going, what they're carrying. You hear people say that, look, maybe there are persons in the protective services, the Coast Guard involved in taking bribes, etc., to turn a blind eye, and maybe that is a possibility. The point is, all of these things are the responsibility of the government, and they should have been dealt with to avoid the problem which occurred.
Point taken, Mr. Lala. Mr. Peters or Dr. Remy, someone asked the question, is 2 weeks, do you think 2 weeks of self-quarantine for persons who may be in contact, primary or secondary contact with, is that 2 weeks sufficient? Also, they said maybe in contact with, is it practical, impractical, is it sufficient, and so on?
Well, it is. It's being practical. That might be the challenge. It is sufficient. 2 weeks in quarantine is sufficient if the country goes on for 2 weeks. But then you have to think about activity. What about business?
That's right.
And vital services to be carried out.
Are you talking about lockdown or 2 weeks of quarantine for the individual? Is that for the individual, or 2 weeks quarantine? You're not talking about lockdown of the country? No,
not lockdown. I said for the persons who have to stay.
The persons, okay.
Yeah. For one, is it practical and so on. But also we want to add to that, and Mr. Peters was alluding to it, with all of these persons going on quarantine and so on, definitely there is going to be some economic impact as well. Okay. Because, and I know Dr. Hussein is not with us, but any thoughts on how we could, treat with the economic challenge? Should there be some sort of allowance now for persons to find payment from NIS for their 2 weeks to alleviate some of the financial responsibilities from the employer when persons have to be self-quarantined because they might have been in contact with a primary person or secondary person? So these are some of the considerations. I don't know who might be able to venture an answer along that line, but just for consideration. Nobody wants to take it.
I think all indicators are that these are going to be very, very difficult times for all sectors, for the government, for the private sector, because it has gone on for such a long period of time. The government would have injected a serious amount of money previously, and to do it again in the event that there is a lockdown, I think the Prime Minister has already indicated that that is not a possibility. Indicators are that our economy is down 10%. That is very, very significant. You know, persons who I've spoken to in the business community, they're very depressed about what is happening. And it's not only the business sector, it's also the service sector has been significantly hit by, you know, the occurrence of COVID when departments have to be shut down. For example, the courts, the family court and the civil court was shut down for a significant period of time because, you know, someone got the virus and everyone had to be quarantined and they had to sanitize, etc. There are other departments as well. The land registry has been affected. Right now, I'm trying to deal with a client with a firearm users application, and we've been calling the department since last week every day, and no one is answering the phone. So it's across the board, all sectors. I'm certain that we're experiencing a very significant fall in productivity. In general in the country, separate and apart from, you know, dollars and cents, productivity has fallen. I'm sure morale has fallen. I know many persons are severely depressed, uncertain about, you know, what is going to happen for the rest of the year. The bright light, Reverend Joseph may want to know, I was looking at a video earlier with Dr. Anthony Fauci from the United States. And he indicated that he wouldn't be, and this was recorded, I think, 2 days ago. So it was a recent statement. He indicated that he wouldn't be surprised if we were to have a vaccine by around November, early December. And I take what Dr. Joseph said, that, you know, getting a vaccine.
Gerald Peters.
Dr. Peters, sorry. But, you know, if we want a bright light, I think there is room to be optimistic. And hope that, you know, by the end of the year, we're able to get a vaccine and we're able to start off to 2021 on a positive note. You know, imagine, you know, we have almost completed this year. It doesn't seem that long, but it's a very, very long time. A lot of time has gone since we have been in this situation, and, you know, we're looking towards the starting of a new year very soon.
I beg to differ with that vaccine story. I agree that we need time. And I mean, we're still waiting on an HIV vaccine, yeah? How many years after? And we were really hoping that that would have caused us to get control of HIV. I think we have to push the behavior issues and work around those in order to get on top of what we are doing right now. Let the vaccine take its time in coming. You know why? Because we would not want to be putting people at risk if vaccines are not given the appropriate, the testing and stuff like that before it is done. I would hate that we expose people to vaccines that are not appropriately tested just for our convenience. If you are telling me that the virus is spread by me being in contact with somebody else, and if I keep away from those persons, then I could do that, then work around that until we get a proper vaccine. I would really want us to push that.
And you see, Dr. Remy, and to the panel, just to be naughty, as some of you know that I can be naughty at times.
Is that right?
Yes, Maria, you're well aware. Ladies and gentlemen viewing, I know many of you are concerned about Carnival 2021, so you want a vaccine early, but I think it would be responsible, a responsible decision to defer that. There should be no Carnival 2021.
We hear it's going to be virtual. It may be virtual.
Right.
Whatever that is.
Pastor Peter, as the epidemiologist, and this you were talking about 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. This rush to a vaccine, what would be the negative impact on our society if we were to really rush and to, implement a vaccine that has not gone through the proper tests?
Even if there is a vaccine in, let's say, the next 2 months or 3 months, there is no certainty that we in Trinidad will have that vaccine. A vaccine, to produce a vaccine costs over $500 million US. And you find that persons who might be in need of it, if you cannot pay for it. Now we know what's going on with the US and the World Health Organization. President Trump wants to pull away from WHO and do what, and he's the major contributor, So even though we get a vaccine is produced in the next 3 months, it is no certainty that we would get that vaccine in the next 6 months.
Can I ask a question, and either doctor would be free to answer it. If a vaccine becomes available internationally, what are the requirements that our government will have to satisfy medically and or legally before the vaccine could be introduced to the public in Trinidad and Tobago? So for example, is there any standard that they would respect, maybe out of the UK? So if a body in the UK or the United States says this is fine, would the government go ahead with it? What would happen?
They do through the WHO PAHO, because this is how we get our vaccines. Okay. And we have a very long and strong history of use of vaccines, right? Elimination of measles, polio, and that kind of thing from the Caribbean and the Americas. So we do have a strong history, and we do get our vaccines that way. The vaccines are purchased, and the way they're purchased, we get it at a reduced rate. So the Minister of Health has already said that they have put in their order for vaccines in anticipation of when they would be ready. So we don't know when that would be, but it would be WHO PAHO saying that this vaccine is okay and this is what we would use. Isn't that right, Mr. Peters?
Yes, you are correct.
Yes.
And the reason why I want to stay on the vaccine is that they have not really done no extensive trials.
No, they have not.
You cannot run a vaccine on the Chinese or the Africans and say that's the vaccine. It's a new disease. It's still unfolding. Right? And if we make an attempt to make a rush, I tell you that we are going to be putting our necks against the gallows.
So we have to push. We have to keep away from our loved ones. In relationships, we have to keep our masks on. We have to keep washing our hands and those kinds of things for a while yet, while we wait on the vaccine, because we have to continue to live. Vaccines are not coming as yet, unless we have a miracle.
Yeah, questions, because I know time is running out so fast. Just bear with us. Just a couple of questions. Someone asks, how contagious could an asymptomatic person be? This is from one of the medical personnel or epidemiologists. How contagious could an asymptomatic person be?
Very contagious. Very contagious. Very contagious. Just touching, talking in the same environment, the person's droplets coming on you, to you if you're not wearing a mask, very contagious. It's more contagious than many of the other viruses we know.
Sure. Now, obviously, lady and gentlemen, and to our listeners, there is going to be severe and some harsh economic challenges. We didn't get Dr. Hussein on, but I'm going to try to get him on to talk about it at next time. But some of the things we can possibly do, I would like to recommend to us, coming from a background in the insurance industry as well, into the ministry, that we may need to make some trims in our budgets. We may need to trim some of the things that might be deemed quote unquote, some luxuries some of us may have. So we're treating with this thing in a real way. We're going to have to trim some of our luxuries, and you may feel that it's not a luxury, But given the amount of, income you may have, some things just might become luxuries. And we may need to make some trim. Secondly, we need to determine, what our capacity is going forward, and we should therefore make adjustments based on the economic capacity we have going forward. And this even impacts on the businesses and so on, Mr. Lala, that you highlighted, that are feeling the pinch. I myself spoke with a former Chamber of Industry and Commerce president today and was hearing about the plight of the businessmen and so on. And even looking ahead, even because, I mean, from our morals perspective, we have our issues with the carnival thing. And that's well known. But we also look at the economic impact of that, the tourism, and all these kinds of things. These are realities. Even now with Caribbean Airlines not up and down the airspace, there's a big loss of income there, and so on. But a question just to you, Mr. Lala, and don't want you to run off with this one. One of the fellow ministers was asking for clarity, or should the Attorney General be a bit clearer as it relates to the regulations, and for leaving it up to the police officers as it relates to us preachers who are in our space. We have our 10 persons in our space. We're doing our live stream. But some persons saying we have to wear masks or we don't have to wear masks, and so on. And there needs to be clarity on that.
No, well, I mean, the doctors would bear me out on this. I mean, you have to wear your mask. Once you are in proximity with other persons, you have to wear your mask. So I don't see that as an issue. I think that as I said earlier, that the Attorney General did quite a fair job with the regulation to cater to as many situations as possible and as many reasons as possible why persons may legitimately not be compelled to wear the mask or face shield, as the case may be. But in relation to your religious services, it's pretty clear that you have 10 people, you're all masked, you do whatever service you want to do, and you broadcast it,
With the mask.
And you should be okay with your mask.
For some of us, I mean, that's a challenge. I mean, realistically, it is. And we are looking at, if you're saying that, we are looking at government ministers giving press conferences every day, and they have no mask on. So what's the legality there? What is fair? I mean, you can't tell me do something if you are not doing it.
Well, you should call them out. But I want to emphasize, Rev, in relation to every situation where you are required to wear a face mask, you could also wear a face shield, which I think is something which people may have more comfort in wearing. So whether in your car, whether you're in a religious place, whether you're in a business place, whether you are out exercising, you are under the regulations allowed to wear a face shield instead of the face mask.
All right. There's still some. I hear you, Mr. Lala, and a lot of people, especially pastors, are listening on tonight just to treat with this particular matter. People, and I appreciate that. People have different concerns. I suppose come next year, Carnival, there'll be people who are listening on for the Carnival issues.
Okay, listen, Winston, I would just like to say we should look at it in terms of the seeking to protect not just ourselves, but others, right? When we see what happened in that big church in Seoul, in Korea, you remember? One church, a large church, it was the center of the epidemic, of their epidemic in Korea came from that one church. Why? Because this person or persons in this large gathering, and we have had also not just Korea, we've seen in the United States, where churches have been the place where there's been a lot of spread. So I don't think you should just look at what the government is not doing, but we should be leaders in terms of making sure that we are doing what is best for us and what is best for our people, as well as best for our communities, and even show the example. Because Winston, we do not want to get infected. We do not want to get our people infected either. Many of our elderly people are in churches, and we don't want them to get infected. So I don't think we should look at it like that. I think we should look at it from the point of view of saying, listen, this will make me and my family and my community safer, and therefore do it that way. This is what I would humbly suggest.
Well, but we're speaking in the context here, Dr. Remy, of there being no persons in the church and you are there streaming. There are no persons here. I'm not looking at.
Okay.
Right?
That's it.
Obviously, we are not gathering. There are no congregational gatherings, so we are not breaking any law, and there are no persons at risk. There might be 1 or 2 persons in a technical room 50 to 100 feet away from you. You understand, Mr. Lala? And you are
all right.
next.
That is different. You're not within a 6 feet. You're not within a 6 feet radius of the person. No. Yeah. Okay. Well, then that's different.
You're 50 to 100 feet in some of the churches away, and
That's
so on.
different.
But anyhow, so you see, there is some room there I'm suggesting for discussion. And I'm batting for us preachers now, Mr. Lala. And I know I understand the legal and the health issue. But lady and gentlemen, you know, there are some other questions that are coming in, but we are out of time. I want to wrap up in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. And you know, there are some questions based on the economy that I don't think any of us might have the capacity to share or to answer in great detail. So I will do my part to try and get Dr. Hussein back with us. But some remarks from you all as we try to maximize these 3 minutes. And I thank you for your patience in giving us these extra minutes. Mr. Lala, you first, then Dr. Remy, and then Pastor Peters.
Yeah, well, I mean, all I could say is wear your mask, you know, and you know, keep yourself safe, keep your family safe, keep everyone safe. But seriously though, I look forward to the government treating with this issue of our citizens stranding abroad. They have to do much, much more than they have done so far, bearing in mind the circumstances that these citizens continue to face, the suffering, and we have to understand that, the suffering that they have faced and they continue to face, and the government has to find a way to get them back as quickly as possible, as safely as possible, and as efficiently as possible.
And I want to endorse that. I've been an advocate for that, Mr. Lala. I raised my voice in the media months ago, asking, because I can identify, we have 2 of our members. One has been stranded. Well, she finished medical school in Barbados and has been trying to come home. And another one who is in work in Saudi Arabia and hasn't been home for 7 months. So, you know, I could identify with these families and the challenges that they faced, albeit, thank God, the circumstances are not as challenging for them as they are for other persons, and so on. But thank you much, Mr. Lala. Dr. Pia, and then Pastor Peters, closing remarks.
In closing, Winston, I'm happy that you have initiated this conversation. We have to have many more of these conversations as we go forward. And even as you talk about the issues, we have to drill down, because to say wear a mask, or to say hand washing, or to say whatever has to be done, physical distancing, we have to look at circumstances where people may not be able to do those things and help them to still be safe as we go forward. So we have to have more community conversations like this, while we try at every level to make this, to beat this crisis that we have in front of us. And it's going to be a long haul.
Thank you, Dr. Remy. Gerald Peters, our epidemiologist on panel tonight.
I want to close with giving you a question for the economist. We didn't mention it at all, but schools are closed. If the fathers are out and the mothers who are working have to stay home to see about the children, that brings another dimension as far as our economy is concerned, because many of those households are headed by women. They are working, and now they are forced to stay home to see about their children. And we don't know when schools are going to be reopened. And again, from my background in health, I would want to say that no amount of legislation will take us out of this pandemic, but we have to take responsibility for ourselves. Wear our masks, wash our hands, social distancing. Then we're good to go. Thank you for being a part of the panel tonight.
So, Senator Dr. Remy, Attorney Mr. Larry Lala, Epidemiologist Reverend Gerald Peters, on behalf of the Open Bible Miracle Center here in Poonah, Trinidad and Tobago, and the faith-based network of Trinidad and Tobago, I want to say thank you much for taking time to share with us tonight. I mean, folks, there are questions pouring in here. Pouring in. And that's a good thing. It says that people really want to understand. They want to be part of the solution by treating with ignorance or myths, as you know, we would have had Pastor Peters highlight that. I want to thank you. I pray God's blessings on yourselves. Hope. We must give the nation hope. From our faith, Pastor Peters, we know that our Savior came to give hope. And I want to encourage all of us in our various spheres of society, business, law, medical, the faith community, sporting, let us give people hope. Let us live that hope that we are speaking of. Let us be examples, Maria. You know, we may not accept all of the legislation because I have an issue with part of it. You understand? I would like to see some possible changes, but let us utilize and honor what is there at present to give hope for our nation. Let us spread love. We had the call today. I heard the Prime Minister, I read today on social media of his call for love. You know, what is love? When we treated with HIV, what did it stand for? Learn the facts. Let us learn the facts about the pandemic, not only the health facts, the economic and other facts. Let us own the problem. Let us see ourselves as part of the solution. Let us value ourselves and others. There are many who have lost loved ones who are very broken. Some of them are still trying to find closure. And E, in the context of HIV, we said embrace those infected and affected. We may not be able to have a physical embrace at this present time, Mr. Lala, but we can have that virtual embrace, that human embrace, as we reach out to those in need, as we help those with whatever little we have. We share what we have and see the hand of God blessing us and our nation. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for being a part of this audience today. I'm sorry that we couldn't answer all of your questions, but I thank the panel for doing what they could have done this evening and look forward to possible other opportunities of us sharing together. God's blessings to you all and your families. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you much and blessings.
Thank you and goodbye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.